single organ system in the body is out of sync when we don't have our circadian rhythm working properly, and everything goes into some degree of malfunction. So it can affect virtually every single function in the body.
I think if people understood, they don't have to exercise a lot. That's the big secret that people go, you must exercise all the time. I go, really, I don't exercise that much. I can be on the road and I can do a 10-minute walk. And out of that 10 minutes, I can have 4 major pushes in there. And that could be my entire workout for the day.
Let's say your body needs, we'll just pick a number, 7 hours, and you only get 6 hours for a consistent period of time. There's data to show that your body actually becomes insulin resistant within 36 to 48 hours.
Back 150 years ago, people weren't going to a gym because it didn't exist. They were getting their physical activity just to get through their day. We get so caught up in all these different types of exercises and fitness crazes, and the same thing with diets. And we need to come back to the basics. Sometimes we make things so much more complex than they need to be.
Welcome to The Real Skinny on Fat, the truth about weight loss. I'm Montel Williams.
And I'm Naomi Whittle, and we have a great episode for you all to watch today.
And we're going to start off with somebody you've seen before if you've seen some of the other episodes. If you haven't, Felice Gersh. Why don't you tell us a little bit about her?
So Dr. Gersh has so much information to share that's so relevant for all of us in today's climate that I really wanted to make sure that I brought her back.
Of course, get it all in.
Yeah.
Take a look at this.
It is an incredible pleasure to have you back, Dr. Gersh. You had so much information for us that we needed to hear more.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be back, and I'm so happy you came right to my neighborhood. How convenient could that be? And we have so much to talk about, and I'm happy to get started.
Excellent. So let's start with the circadian rhythm. It won the Nobel Prize. A lot of people have heard the word or not. Can you break it down for us and then explain to us why it's so important to pay attention to?
Well, it's really an amazing, and I think of it as a very romantic story, how all life forms on Earth have evolved for survival. And survival on Earth means working in conjunction with the rotation of the Earth. So the circadian rhythm applies to the 24-hour rotation of the Earth. And it turns out that for survival, certain creatures do better working at the daytime or at the nighttime. So humans, for example, are like totally different creatures. In the day, we're metabolically active, we're hungry, and our immune systems are geared for helping in case we get a cut or an infection or something like that happens, because we're active, we're doing things. At night, we're totally different creatures. Our immune systems are replenishing themselves, our brains are healing, and our metabolism is slowed. So we're not supposed to be eating. Everything is different. Our blood pressure goes down, our temperature goes down. So we're totally in beat, in the rhythm of the Earth. The problem is that we evolved like this over many, many millennia. And nowadays, we're not living with the beat. We've changed everything, but our genes have not changed. And because of that, people are in trouble. People are suffering with just a multitude of medical problems. And up until very recently, we didn't even know there was a circadian rhythm in the humans. We didn't know there were clock genes. And in fact, 1/3 of all the genes in our body are actually clock genes, and the others work in sort of a beautiful synergy with the clock genes. So it's time that we learned we have to live with our beat, with our inherent rhythms.
What are some of the effects of not living with the beat of our bodies, of the Earth?
Well, it's actually huge because every cell in our body has clock genes. They're all working with the clock. And all of our metabolic processes are aligned with the clock. So when we live off the beat, what happens is we have immune dysfunction, we have mental health problems, cognitive problems, emotional problems, and we have problems with metabolism, so we have higher rates of obesity and diabetes. So basically, every single organ system in the body is out of sync when we don't have our circadian rhythm working properly, and everything goes into some degree of malfunction. So it can affect virtually every single function in the body. It's really a horrendous problem when we don't live with our rhythms. And it's only just like in the 1990s that we discovered this. So it's time we really understood this and then changed a lot of the things that we're doing so that we can actually regain our health.
How do we know that our circadian rhythms are off? Or how do we know that we're not working with our own beat?
Well, first of all, there are certain things that if you're not doing them correctly, you can be quite sure that you're having problems. But some of the very obvious signs that you're having circadian rhythm dysfunction are if you're having a lot of anxiety and depression, if you're having cognitive problems and you feel like you have brain fog, if you're a female and you have menstrual dysfunction, if you have PMS. We now know that is actually related to circadian dysfunction. If you have gut problems, one of the things that's amazing is that we've known for some time that people who have acid reflux, what we call GERD, gastroesophageal reflux, that's related to stress and to lack of sleep. We now know that that's all related to the circadian rhythm, and that people who are out of sync are going to have a lot of GI problems because the entire gut is on the rhythm. On the beat. We have a whole nervous system in the GI tract called the enteric nervous system, which is all linked to the rhythm. And as well, we have this amazing civilization, this massive complex civilization which lives within us and on us called the microbiome. And the cells, the microbes of the microbiome, all have their own clock genes as well, and they live in a complete homogeneous and synchronous relationship with our clock genes. So when we eat at the wrong times, when we don't go to sleep at the right times, we end up in circadian rhythm massive dysfunction, and it manifests with all of these different kinds of features.
So what you just explained to us around signs of understanding, let's say, how our circadian rhythm can be off and how our beat can be off, and recognizing that there's a connection with the microbiome is super fascinating. And I think for everyone that's listening, if we say, yes, check, that could be me, that could be me, that could be me, what do we need to do first and foremost to take this our circadian rhythm and help to regulate it?
So the first thing would be, when do you go to bed? So we are designed to have this beautiful rhythm of cortisol and melatonin. Most people know about that, but we do a lot of things that disrupt that rhythm. So one thing is we go to bed much too late. We're designed to go to bed between 10 and 11, and every single hormone in our body is on a clock. It comes out and it peaks at a certain time, it dips at a certain time. Melatonin peaks at 2 a.m. But if you have not gone to bed at a reasonable time, the whole production of melatonin is going to be off, and you're not going to get that peak. And that coincides with our different rhythms of our sleep, which are very important for rejuvenation of our brain and brain health. So go to bed. You have to go to bed between 10 and 11. The other thing is, don't change your routine on the weekend. We call that social jet lag. So everybody knows that if you fly across many time zones, that you will have what we call jet lag. But they don't think about self-imposed jet lag, which we call social jet lag, where you stay up really late on the weekend and then you try to sleep late, and you're trying to change your clock. It doesn't work that way. You can't change your clock genes. They're embedded into us. So try to keep the same rhythm. Now, we're flexible. So once in a while, you can, of course, do something that's off the beat, but most of the time, try to stay with the beat. The other thing is to promote proper sleep and have the melatonin come out. You need to have a very dark room. We live with so much ambient light now that it affects our rhythms of our melatonin. It doesn't work properly. Even a little bit of light coming through our eyelids has been shown to suppress melatonin production.
Wow.
So I actually sleep now with
An eye mask?
I do.
Do you use a silk one?
You know, I use a natural fiber one that I actually got on. I didn't actually buy it. I got it when I was flying a business class across many time zones, and I was going through circadian rhythm problems. But it's quite comfortable. But there are a lot of them out there.
Right.
And I found that I could adjust to it. And I could not get the light really dark in my bedroom. There's just too much coming in through the cracks around the windows and such. So you definitely want to have a very dark room. The other thing is stop watching television, stop
Right.
with the blue light. You know, people know about that. The computer screens and the iPhones, you should try at least 2 hours before you go to bed to just turn it off.
It's very interesting to think about blue light, right? We know that on the spectrum of light, the rainbow of light, you know, the ultraviolet, the purples, we wear sunglasses, we protect our body from those UVA and UVB rays. But now that we're starting to understand, right next to the ultraviolet are the blue lights, and the blue light has such a detrimental impact on our health and our well-being, and we're just starting to see probably more and more of the research coming out into the media.
And it's really all about timing. Because
Right.
blue light in the morning is not going to be evil. So, and I'm glad you mentioned about light, because some of the things that you could do to set your circadian rhythm is to see bright light in the morning. That is really important. A lot of people, they never get outside. You know, so the things that you can do to help set your clock. So there's a clock in our brain. That's called the master clock. And it sits on top of the optic nerve because it senses light and dark. That's all it senses, light and dark. But if you live in a world of indoors, where you only have, you know, little ambient room light, you don't really get the bright light of the sun, you have problems with setting your clock. And we know that people who have the ultimate blindness, where they have only blackness, that they have tremendous problems with their rhythms, with their mood, with their cognition. That's why they're giving them now a pharmaceutical that sort of mimics melatonin to try to help them, because it's such a huge problem when you don't see light. So in the morning, when you get up, try to get some bright light. And you've probably heard of SAD, seasonal affective disorder. Why is that a problem? It has to do with our rhythms, because our rhythms are related to our moods, and light sets the clock. So now
And
it all
the
makes
mood.
sense, right?
Very,
why,
very
why
interesting.
do they do light therapy? It's all about setting the clock. So in the morning, set your clock yourself. Get bright light. The other thing is midday. Get out, and depending on your skin texture, like if you're a dark skinned person, you can probably go out for 45 minutes. And if you're very, very fair, very, very light skinned, you may only tolerate maybe direct sun for 15 minutes. But don't go out with sunglasses, no sunblock, and just get the sun directly on you. But just for, you know, that little bit of time. Watch the sunset. Isn't that amazing? The colors of the sunset, the oranges and the reds and the yellows, they actually program our brain to prepare for evening and to prepare for sleep. So you can do a lot of wonderful things to help get your clock back in order. Another thing that has been shown is that if you go camping, they've found that if you go camping for just a weekend, for 2 days, and you lie on the ground, you know, like camping, and you do what we call earthing or grounding,
Yes.
and you get in touch with the earth, and you're out under the stars and the moon, and you see the sun, you can pretty much reset your clock in just one weekend and get back in sync.
Really? Being able to help to get our circadian rhythm back on track. How does this relate to the obesity epidemic or the overweight issues that we experience in this country at such a high rate?
Well, it actually does relate greatly. So as we know now, everything relates to everything. We're one whole. So what relates to our mood relates to our metabolic health, and so forth. So it turns out that, as we talked about, that every organ system, every cell has a clock. So the liver and the gut have clocks, and the gut microbiome, and this is so amazing, you know, they have their own clocks. The liver is very, very key to metabolic health. When your circadian rhythm is off, your liver metabolic functions are off. When your liver metabolic functions are off, it's like the liver enzymes, everything is just not working quite right because the timing is off. It's like an orchestra where every instrument is playing a little bit different timing of the music. So instead of sounding like a beautiful symphony, it's really like noise. And that's what's going on in your liver. The liver ends up getting inflamed. The gut gets inflamed because everything is on a timer. Without that timer, inflammation starts to rule the day. And inflammation leads to, now we know everything that's wrong in our bodies, right? And the gut, when that's inflamed, the brain is inflamed, and the liver is inflamed. So when you have liver inflammation, you get fatty liver. And under that situation, the liver goes into a condition that's called uncontrolled gluconeogenesis. The liver just starts pouring out sugar. It also starts pouring out fats in an uncontrolled fashion. It's like the brakes are off. It doesn't make as much insulin. It creates signaling to the pancreas, so the pancreas doesn't produce as much insulin. Blood sugar starts to rise, and insulin resistance increases. And now you're in a situation of metabolic distress, really, in the body. So you have now insulin resistance. So although you may not even be making quite as much insulin as the body needs to get rid of all that sugar that's being produced, you still have more insulin than you would have had before. And you end up, and insulin promotes fat deposition and fat production. So you're in a situation where you're either burning fat or you're storing fat. And when you have uncontrolled liver gluconeogenesis and you're pouring out the fats, the triglycerides go up. That's why if you ever do blood work, you'll find that there's a strong correlation between blood sugar levels and triglyceride levels. And people are like, what's all that about? It's all about liver dysfunction because the same process that produces all the sugar is producing all this fat. That's what triglycerides are. So when you have that, you're producing lots of fat. And the fat ends up going into organs it doesn't even belong in. Like you get the fatty liver, but you also get fatty heart, you get fatty muscle, and you have insulin resistance, and you can store fat. But the mechanisms involved in burning fat are not working properly. Because how do you burn fat? In order to burn fat, you have to go into something of a fasting state, right? Because why would you just suddenly start burning fat?
Right.
Everything in the body is programmed for survival. If you're making lots of sugar, if you have lots of fat and sugar in the body isn't going to suddenly know that you should start burning it because it has such a big supply. The body burns fat when there isn't food coming in.
So it's burning its body fat when the fat that's already existing in the body when there isn't food coming in.
Exactly. I know it seems so logical. If you're constantly eating, you're not going to start burning all your fat. Right? It's not going to happen.
Right.
And you're not going to trigger this other amazing process that we call autophagy that we can talk about as well. So when you have this problem of circadian dysfunction and you have gut microbiome dysfunction, you have pretty much total body dysfunction, and you have this problem with your liver that it's really out of sync and it's producing all the sugar and all this fat, you cannot burn fat. Because your body just says, we're just swimming in fat and sugar. We don't need to burn. We've got all this supply. So you can never trigger burning of fat. You can never trigger cellular rejuvenation. So you're in a state of constant growth and proliferation because when you have all this, you're going to increase your growth factors in your body, like what we call IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. And we know that high levels of chronic growth factors are associated with potential for cancer. And when you have inflammation, because this all leads to chronic inflammation in an environment of chronic growth can lead to promoting cancer because the inflammation can cause DNA breakage and the growth factors can trigger the growth of the abnormal cells. So we have the perfect environment for cancer, we have the perfect environment for obesity and diabetes, and now we understand cancer is a metabolic disorder, right? It's all linked. So you have total metabolic dysfunction. Everything is about metabolism. So the circadian rhythm, when it's out of order, leads to total metabolic dysfunction and increases your risk of dementia and metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, and cancer.
So there's this direct correlation between something that we've just been really learning about since, what did you say, the early 90s with the circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm dysfunction impacts the metabolic dysfunction. So it's a domino effect almost.
It's really a direct relationship. It's that
Fascinating.
powerful. It is
Yeah.
so powerful. And everything we're doing in our society is damaging our circadian rhythm. We're eating at the wrong times, and we're eating constantly. The gut microbiome, which has its clocks, and the other peripheral clocks, like the clock in the liver, they don't see light or dark. They get the signal from the master clock in the brain. But when the master clock in the brain is dysfunctional because we're looking at light at the wrong time of day, like we're seeing light at midnight. So our circadian master clock is messed up because it doesn't know what's going on because it's not getting the proper signals. And then the peripheral clocks can also be programmed through timed eating. But if we're eating like we do now, like all around the clock, and somewhere, somebody came up with this very non-bright idea, but people thought it was bright, that you should eat every 2 hours. Your body should not have to be eating every 2 hours. We have mechanisms that we can fast and maintain our blood sugars. But when you constantly feed, and you're eating late at night because our pancreas goes to sleep at 7 p.m. When you start eating all around the clock and you're eating nonstop, some people drink sugary beverages all day long nonstop, then our peripheral clocks, that's what we call them, the peripheral clocks, like in our liver, in our gut microbiome and so forth, they don't know what time it is because they can be programmed through timed eating. They don't know when it's light or dark, but they know when food's coming in. The other thing about fasting, there's so many different ways of fasting, but some of them will not give you anywhere near the benefits as other ways. If you stop eating for 1 or 2 days a week, they sometimes call that the 5-2, where 2 days out of 7 you fast, you will lose weight if you don't compensate by eating more the other days. But you will not trigger any of the other protective and sort of rejuvenating processes in the body. That will not happen. And you will not really get where you want to go in the long run if you're looking for longevity and improved brain health, but you will lose some weight. So there's benefits from losing weight. So I can't really discourage people from doing that, but I want them to know that that's not optimal. The optimal thing that you should do is to fast for like 4 days with a water fast. Now that's very hard for people to do, but it's only after you've fasted, truly fasted, just with water for about 3 days that you trigger these amazing processes in the body that we call autophagy, and then subsequently the stimulation of stem cells to regenerate. So what happens is, if you truly fast for 4 days, or there are alternatives where you can do a fasting mimicking diet. But if you truly fast, one of the two ways, either with a fasting mimicking diet or with a true fast, once you get out to be about 4 days into this fast, that's when your body says, okay, there is no food coming. Now I have to really rejuvenate. Because the body is intrinsically lazy. So day 1, day 2, it says, let's just wait. More food will come. We'll just wait. We don't want to have to work. But by day 3 to 4, that's when the body says, there is no food coming. Now we have to really trigger these mechanisms. And what happens is, if you don't have food, you're going to start burning fat. So you actually, by day 3, you go into ketosis because you're not making the sugar. You've used up all your glycogen stores. That's like the precursors to sugar that we store in our muscle and in our liver. And then you have to start burning fat because otherwise you have no energy for your brain, for your heart. So you have to start burning fat. So for some people, though, they're so poor at burning fat, their mechanisms are so, just out of whack, that they may feel terrible for a little bit because they feel like they're hypoglycemic, which they may be, because they're not good at triggering fat burning. But give it a little time and it will happen. So once you get into the ketosis, the people will feel good because ketone bodies are used by the brain for energy. So your brain will feel good, you'll feel alert, you'll feel strong, and then your cells say, well, there's no food coming in. So just like you burn fat for your overall body, the cells start burning themselves up. So what they do is you take the cellular components that are old and they put them through what I call the recycle bin. It's called the lysosome. And they break down the organelles of the cell into their components, like amino acids and fatty acids, and then the cell reconstructs itself with internal new designed organelles, new structures. So the cell actually completely revamps itself. So you get like a totally rejuvenated cell. And these cells can live longer, and potentially you can live longer. We know that doing this, animals live longer, but we don't have human data. But certainly your cells will be better functioning and your organs then will be better functioning. So that gets triggered. The other thing that happens when you do this, what we call periodic fasting, is that crappy cells, like potentially cancer cells that are developing, they go into what we call programmed self-suicide or apoptosis. So this could potentially help prevent cancer from developing in a person, because the body says, you know what, we're only going to feed the healthy cells. The body is primed for survival. So it says, we're going to rejuvenate the good cells and we're going to simply get rid of the bad cells. It's like throwing the excess weight overboard if your boat has a leak, right? You just get rid of those old cells. And so most of your organs will literally shrink, which sounds terrible. Your organs are shrinking, but then they rejuvenate because stem cells are stimulated. So you actually, people travel all over the world to get stem cells.
Right.
You have them in your own body, and they can be stimulated to go into action, and you can then trigger stem cells to rejuvenate your organs. So they actually regrow. So you've rejuvenated your organs, you've revamped your cells, and you've gotten rid of the crappy cells. And that will happen, but only if you fast for about 4 days, or you do the fasting mimicking diet, which is what I do, because nobody really wants to fast. Humans didn't evolve with fasting because they liked it. It's because that's, we didn't have food. We have, I'll say, tricks that we have to help people to not have to fast but get the benefits of fasting. But when you do this, your whole body is rejuvenating, and the brain is also rejuvenating. So there's growth factors in the brain that are very good for the brain. Mm-hmm. One of them is called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this increases when you do real fasting, what I call periodic fasting. So you'll feel smarter, your brain will be better off. And they're doing research now with Alzheimer's. Then, of course, this tremendously helps with metabolic syndrome. So your insulin levels will drop, the inflammatory markers go down, the lipids go down, because the liver now is actually getting in sync. What they found is that when you do fasting, it's like a reboot. It's like a total body reboot. So your circadian rhythm gets back in sync.
Fascinating.
Your gut microbiome gets fixed as well. So you can help fix your circadian rhythm, you can get things online, you lower your inflammation, and you improve your total metabolic situation. So when you have metabolic health, of course, it reduces your risk of dementia, it reduces your risk of cancer, and they're now doing studies involving all of these things. We know also, this has been proven, that when you do the fasting mimicking diet, it actually causes beta cells to rejuvenate. So early stage type 1 diabetics may be cured. So these are the amazing properties that the human body can harness when you do fasting correctly. That's why I really want to educate people that just fasting 1 or 2 days a week, they will lose weight, but none of these mechanisms will be triggered. So you won't get any of that benefit.
So getting back to the microbiome and how we can support our microbiome health and how that has such a big impact on so much that's going on within our body, where do, let's say, artificial sweeteners sort of come into the microbiome health, or how do they impact our microbiome?
It's a tremendous detriment to our health. One of the things that I want to emphasize is you should not have chemicals in your diet, whether they're artificial sweeteners.
But how is that even possible in today's world?
It is hard, but I say to my patients, do not eat things that come in packages. You know, if it has a label and it has anything other than, say, organic stewed tomatoes, then don't eat it. Just say no. Go to farmers markets. Eat real food. That keeps being, you hear that expression all the time. Eat real food. Whoever thought that you'd have to put the word real in front of food, right? It's crazy. But we have crazy food, manufactured food, and artificial sweeteners were promoted as a way to lose weight, to not have diabetes, and it's exactly the opposite. Because when all this stuff came out, nobody knew that we have a gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome is key to maintaining the circadian clock and to maintaining the circadian clock in the liver. When you have a dysbiosis or abnormal gut microbiome, it sends signals through the portal vein, which goes right to the liver, and it completely disrupts the liver's microbiome. So what goes on in the gut, in the microbiome in the gut, completely translates into the health of the liver. There's a direct conduit. So when you eat something that has artificial sweetener in it, you're disrupting the gut microbiome. You're harming the gut microbiome. And that in turn harms the liver and creates the problem that we talked about, where you have liver that is out of whack with its time, and it becomes a fatty liver, and it starts, spewing out the fats and the sugars, and it goes crazy. That's why we did not understand, how is it that you can have an artificial sweetener which has no calories in it, right?
Right.
Because it's not just about calories. We now know that it has no calories, but yet it can promote obesity and diabetes. It's because you're disrupting your gut microbiome and its clocks and its composition, and then you're disrupting the liver. And the amazing thing is that still we sell this stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
we look around, it's like, how can people be eating this? How can people be buying this? We have to get the word out that these are not health foods. These are like toxins. And then you add to it the herbicides and the pesticides and the emulsifiers and the other chemicals that are in our foods, and all these different dyes and artificial flavors. And now that we understand the gut microbiome, we have to nurture it. Because we did not know it was there, we inadvertently have done what? We have tortured it. We have starved it. We have poisoned it. And we've killed it, of course, with antibiotics. And we have antibiotics that have been in our foods, right? 70% of antibiotics have been in feedlot animals. Mm-hmm. So we've inadvertently done so much damage to our gut microbiome. We have to take away the poisons to it, and then we have to nurture it. We have to nurture it with fiber. So there's just so much work to be done, but it all begins with at least eating real food and getting these chemicals out of our diets as best we can.
So we talk so much about the microbiome and what it is, and it's probably one of the biggest buzzwords in health because it is so newly understood or beginning to be understood. Can you give us an overall definition of the microbiome and then help us understand how sleep relates to it?
Absolutely. So the microbiome is the collective of the entire genetic material of these microbes. And it's actually not just bacteria. So the bacteria part of the microbiome, which is what we usually refer to as the microbiome, is the microbes, the bacteria. But then there's really what we call the virome, which is the viral component, which now we're understanding is actually probably very, very important, the viral component. And then there's the fungus component, the yeast and fungal, and we call that the mycobiome. So it's the microbiome, the virome, and the mycobiome.
So it's a three-part.
It's a three-parter, right?
Interesting.
And they all work in this amazing synergism. And we're just barely beginning to touch the surface and scratch the surface of this, because it is the most complex ecosystem that we have ever discovered. We think a rainforest is complex, but this is way more complex. And we now know that we have done so many things to change things. For example, like using certain chemical disinfectants and types of antibiotics. And now they've discovered that there's a type of a starch that's a natural starch that they put in a lot of foods, a lot of manufactured foods, which breaks down into a type of a sugar, which is all actually natural, but it's never natural in food. And it actually alters a type of bacteria that's called C. diff, Clostridia difficile, and it turns it into a super toxic type of bacteria that is now an epidemic. And we didn't know, why is there this incredible epidemic of this infection called Clostridia difficile, which it turns out it's actually because of food additives, and it's altering our gut microbiome. So everything relates to the gut microbiome, and so does sleep. So it turns out that certain microbes that are in our gut microbiome actually respond, and they're stimulated by melatonin. They actually have melatonin receptors. And as you probably have heard, but maybe not everyone has heard, there's more melatonin made in our gut than in our brain. So, that's why they sometimes talk about the gut as the second brain. There's a lot of things that go on. There's a lot of neurons, and there's a lot of the same neurotransmitters and hormones that are produced in the brain are produced in the gut. And melatonin is one of them. And so there are actually certain specific types of bacteria that when they're in the presence of melatonin, which will only be produced at night when you're properly sleeping, they actually swarm, just like insects swarm. And they actually then communicate with other microbes to create this amazing sort of harmony and synergism that then ultimately they manufacture products that are called short-chain fatty acids. The bacteria actually make neurotransmitters. Bacteria actually make serotonin. They're like
All
little
part of the
factors.
microbiome.
They're all part of the microbiome, but none of this works properly unless you have the right melatonin to work with the right microbes that then communicate down the line, like a series, that goes a cascade that goes down the line to make everything work right. So that's the problem. It's complex and everything has to be right. It's kind of like if you have this elaborate, complex puzzle and there's like screws that like work in it, but if you have one screw that's missing, the whole thing collapses. It's so intertwined and it requires the whole blend all to work together. And that's the problem, is that we evolved to have everything just right. We're supposed to eat right, we're supposed to sleep right, we're supposed to move right, we're not supposed to be sitting all the time,
Right.
Sitting is the new smoking, and all these things all contribute to our overall state of being. And when you start pulling one thing out at a time, it's the whole deck of cards collapses. So we have to really get back to basics and live the way we were genetically programmed. It's like a beautiful thing. We just have to live the way we were designed to live. It's just that we've done everything in our society to change that and make it more challenging.
It's very interesting. I was speaking with Dr. Chestnut, and he was saying, with all the different species that are out there, that we are the ones that believe that we have to keep sort of changing the things that we eat and the way that we do things, but really it's just getting back to the way we've done it all along. And he used an example of giraffes, that giraffes, they don't get sicker as a species, as an animal species, like we do over time.
Well, I love that you brought in the animals.
Yeah.
So we humans collected a lot of wild animals and we put them in zoos. And what did they discover when they put animals in a cage?
Right.
They found that they would not reproduce, that they became antisocial, that they got fat and lazy and had a lot of anxiety. So what did they do at first? They gave them Prozac and sleeping pills. They actually did this to animals in the zoo. And then someone very clever said, you know what, maybe we should try to create a natural habitat and put the animals back into a more natural environment. And that's what the new modern zoos are, right? They try to open up the cages and put them into natural habitats. So why can't we do that for us, right? We live sometimes in self-imposed cages, and then we wonder why we develop all those same things. We can't sleep, we're antisocial, we don't
Right.
want to reproduce. How many, there's like a high percentage of sexless marriages out there. Because
Right.
I'm too tired. I don't feel like it. Half the people have no sex drive. We've done everything that we did to the animals that we put in the cages in the zoos, and then what do we do with ourselves? We give ourselves what? Prozac and antidepressants. The high percentage of women, because women are more prone to circadian rhythm dysfunction than men.
Really?
By the way, yeah. And that's why women have twice the incidence of depression. It's about circadian dysfunction. And the PMS, like I mentioned, is
Right.
circadian dysfunction. And so we medicate. People have circadian dysfunction, so we give them acid blockers, which then actually makes things worse. We give them drugs to sleep, but then we disrupt their normal sleep. We give them drugs for depression, but we're altering their neurotransmitters in ways that are crazy, because the neurotransmitters are in the gut, they're not just in the brain. So we're creating a whole slew of collateral injuries to people. So we have to stop doing this. We have to be put back into our natural habitat, and then we can thrive.
And we all want to thrive. We want to be able to thrive and not suffer and really live our lives in the best possible way. Thank you so much for educating us on all the clocks in our body, and the microbiome is actually 3 parts. Who would have understood? And I'm so excited to follow you and the work that you continue to do. Thank you for sharing.
It's been just a great pleasure, and I hope that we'll get together and we'll explore the newest knowledge as it comes down the track.
I know you're going to be right at the forefront of it. I love it.
Thank you so much.
And that's why we made sure she had the encore that she's gotten.
Exactly. She's filled with so much information, and it's putting those pieces together in such a meaningful way that really makes Dr. Gersh one of the world's top experts as an OBGYN.
Well, our next guest, I think a lot of people have heard of before, Kathy Smith.
Yeah, Kathy Smith has an incredible background. She is a legend as a fitness expert. She can teach us different ways of moving and walking that really allow us to live and breathe and have the health that we only imagine. She gets us off the couch, and she's such a beautiful, beautiful woman. She teaches us all how to age gracefully.
Take a look at this.
It is so exciting to be talking with you. Can you tell us your name and a little bit about your incredible background?
Okay, well, my name is Kathy Smith. I've been in the fitness business for, I want to say 100 years, but that's probably a little too long. Probably about 40 years now I've been in the fitness business. So, and my story, I think what's unique about my story is that what brought me into the fitness business. So I was raised in the military. Traveled around the world. My father was an Air Force pilot, and we moved every 2 to 3 years. And when I was a senior in high school, my father had a heart attack 3 days before my high school graduation. So I was 17 at the time. My dad, it just rocked my world because my dad meant everything to me. As you can imagine, I was very, very close to him. But then 2 years later, my mother was killed in a plane crash. So by the time I was 19 years old, I had lost both my parents. I was orphaned. It was 1972, right in that time frame. So if you can imagine, it was the Vietnam War. It was the sexual revolution. It was women's rights. It was all about civil rights. It was a time of turmoil in this country. And here I was, completely orphaned, not knowing what I was going to do with my life. And I literally went into this, just like a depression, like the world was just on me. It was so heavy. And I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And just even thinking about it, I was sitting on a street corner one night. I thought, what am I going to do? And, life has a way of just opening doors at the right time. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was a football player. So I would go to the track with him. And not because I wanted to go running. I wasn't an athlete or anything like that, but because I literally did not want to be alone. I thought, I'm just going to go to the track with him, and I would run one lap and then rest and then run another one. And pretty soon I started linking those laps together, and I would come back, and after about 2 miles, I would find that the clouds started to separate, and I started to feel so much better. And I started running further and further, and I ran my first marathon in 1975. And I say that because it was way before the time women were running marathons. So moved to LA, and I took my aerobic training. I combined that with my love of dance, my love of music, and I created a dance aerobics class. And there it was, and it was kind of funny because in the class, when I first started going to classes, there was one class in Los Angeles, and Jane Fonda would be in the class, Barbara Streisand was in the class, and we would be sitting there doing all these arm circles, and I thought, this is great, but I love aerobics. And so I brought that aerobic component, started teaching, got this big following, which led to my first product, which, believe it or not, was an exercise album. So before DVD, before VCR, there's albums, and you would take an album, you would put it on your turntable, and then you would follow along on a poster on the wall, and I would be doing it, the moves on a poster, and then you'd hear my voice. So that went into video, which I did my first video in 1981, and that kind of launched me into getting into the Video Hall of Fame, selling over 20 million video DVDs, and then starting with with all kinds of products, between treadmills. I loved walking. I mean, walking, especially when I started having babies, and when your body gets too big, your breasts get a little too big, you feel a little too heavy to do all this other stuff, walking became such a passion of mine. And people like poo-pooed walking, like that was for, if you couldn't do anything else. And I found that walking actually was a big life changer for me. I would be out there, and I did a lot of studying and the science behind walking, and I trained with a great athlete. Her name was Ellen Abbott. But the techniques of turning your walk into something that where you can you're using your arms, you're using your total body, and you're starting to pick up the pace to the point where it is making a difference as far as the number of calories you're burning, the number of muscles you're burning. So I did a whole walking program, which then, worked into all the other books that I've done and other products that I've done through the years.
With your walking program, did you find that you wanted to get the heart rate at a certain level? What were the overall objectives with your walking program?
Well, I divided it into stages, and I think I think part of my success in life has been that I love people. I love reaching out to people, and instead of saying what I want, I would always go to what do you want, and where are you at? I like to meet people where they're at. So there's no sense me developing a program for an Olympian,
Right,
when you had just started getting off the couch. So what I really like listening to women, and I would first get their letters and then I would get their emails, and it's just like listening to what they wanted, and they wanted to be able to move, but because of the weight, because of a knee problem, because of sore joints or whatever, they felt that it was difficult. So the first thing that with any program, I always like to lay the foundation. And with that, it's like finding out, really having people walk a mile and just on your terms, go walk a mile. So the first thing I have people do, walk a mile, take your car out, get the odometer out, either go to a track or in your car, figure out what a mile is and how fast can you walk it. And if you're walking your mile in 25 minutes, then we're going to start there. If you're walking your mile in 16 minutes, we're going to start there. And so there it depends. If you're walking in 16 minutes, then I'm going to show you techniques that you're going to use an arm pumping technique. You're going to use a heel toe push technique. You're going to use a glute technique that I love to use of how to propel yourself forward so your energy level is going like this. You're not bobbing like this, but your energy is going like this. And how do we increase that speed a little bit? But if you're walking at a 25-minute mile, then what I'm going to be working on with you is just the simple things of posture. Because we all start, and it starts with posture. Anything from where we're sitting right now.
You have the most amazing posture I've ever seen.
It's funny. It's just, I have cues for myself throughout the day.
Do.
And it's just, and it's something, I even went the other day to, get a little bit of an adjustment and whatever. And, the simple thing, we all tend to,
Yes,
like
this is what I do.
So you take your thumbs and you turn them, outwardly rotate them, and then you just feel that thing and just press your arms back just a little bit, and then start to pinch that area right between your shoulder blades as if you have a pencil back there. And very subtle, but just try to find right that down there at the bottom, and just think if you have a pencil back there and you're squeezing it. And now last thing is, we tend to jut our face forward. So what I want you to do is imagine you have a hand in the back of your head and you're just pushing it. It's very subtle, but you're pushing back ever so slightly. And that little 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you can do that when you're in the car, when you're standing in line, whatever. But that's always kind of training you to stretch these out. These get contracted, and the other ones could start to weaken in the back because we only work. I always say we work our vanity muscles. So you're looking in the mirror, we see the abs.
Yes.
We're looking at the shoulders maybe, but all those back. I love the back side of the body, and that posterior chain it's called, starting from the top all the way to the lower back to the glutes, and that's really important for posture. So the great thing about walking is that you can do a steady state walk, which you do the same intensity for 30, 45 minutes, or you can do something called high intensity training, HIIT training, high intensity interval training. And I recommend everybody put a little bit of HIIT training into their workouts. And here's the reason why. Well, first of all, let me show you how to do it. Imagine you're going out for a walk, and you're walking out on a scale of 1 to 10. You're at about a 6 or 7, which means you can kind of carry on the conversation with the person next to you. You kind of have your thoughts together. You can think about what you're going to have for dinner tonight. For an interval of time, whether it's 20 seconds, 40 seconds, or a minute, you're going to pick up the intensity so that you're pumping and you're walking at an intensity of more like an 8 to a 9. And at a 9, you're not thinking about anything else except, oh no, how much longer do I have to go at this pace? You're going boom, 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 and you're just going, okay, 20 more seconds, I can do it. And then you pull back to that steady state. So you don't stop. You pull back to that steady state where you're kind of at that 6, 7. You're going, oh, okay. And we call that an active recovery. And now you add you add those intervals, and you start to add more and more. And here's the reason why. Interval training is the key to staying young. And it happens on the cellular level. And it happens for a variety of reasons. But one of the most interesting things recently that's come out is that it helps to generate more mitochondria. And so what happens is mitochondria are the energy sources in your cells. And as you age, the mitochondria sort of start to shrivel up a little bit, just like maybe the skin on your face as you watch it age. Those mitochondria shrivel up. Well, with HIIT training, what they found is that you keep those mitochondria, going on all cylinders, and they just keep regenerating. So that's the thing about exercise. Even though people always go like, "How do I get rid of this, Kathy?" And I don't mind answering those questions, but this is related to the total body. And just like everything else in life, can't quite separate this from the skin, from the hair, from the complexion, from the vitality, from the energy. It all goes together, and it really starts with adding just a little bit of this HIIT training. I think if people understood that exercise, they don't have to exercise a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's the big secret that people go, "You must exercise all the time." I go, "Really? I don't exercise that much. I just exercise, and I have an intensity level so that I get to a point where I can get out and do these. I can be on the road, and I can do a 10-minute walk. And out of that 10-minute, I can have 4 major pushes in there. And that can be my entire workout for the day."
Kathy, so much of what you've said to me really resonates, and it's about being strong on the inside. So if it's the movement that we're doing, and we're moving all the time, and we've heard, sitting is the new smoking. And yet when we're living in a life where we sit so much of the time, most people have to sit behind a computer and they're in a cube or whatever it may be. When you think about the strength that we need to have inside, what are the things that we could do, like even in an office setting, that will incorporate into our lives to make us stronger?
Well, great question. I think one thing is you have to bust the myth. You actually even said something that in your question that reinforced the myth. And you said, there's so many people that have to sit all the time. So you've just put it out to the world. And I challenge, why? Yeah. Why? I mean, it's just because it's been done that way. But there's a great book out. I mean, and you guys could even try this. I mean, try for a day not sitting down. I mean, literally, we're doing this interview right now, and naturally you've done it because we're sitting. But I don't know if you watched all the news networks now. Everybody stands.
That's right.
They all stand. Everybody stands. So it's not just a standing desk. It's not just that, because I realize there's time you have to sit. But the main thing is, do you have to sit and stay there? So my recommendation is, even if you're at a desk job and you've designed, I would say that I would put it in your budget. I know it's not, most people can't replace their desk at this point, but when it's time to replace your desk, think of something that gives you some flexibility. And I don't when I get up in the morning, I don't start talking on the phone and sit in the chair. I put my legs up at the wall, or I do a wall sit, or or I stand, or, the biggest thing is, which I could do it right here, but we lose the ability. The big thing happens when we age, we lose flexibility in our hips. And if you go to China, if you go to other parts of the world where even 100-year-old woman can sit and go into her squat. And part of that is because they're doing it all the time. And we kind of fuse ourselves into these little, And my suggestion is to people, break the mold a little bit, and don't just do it slowly. Just find a way that every 20 minutes you're getting out of your chair for something.
Every 20 minutes?
Yes.
Awesome. Because we hear once an hour. So I typically will put my alarm on, and once an hour I'll get up, I'll move, I'll walk around when I'm in the office. And that's hard for somebody like me who focuses so much in on the work. I have to have that timer. Otherwise, 3 or 4 hours will pass. Yes. And I can't help myself because I'm just so in the work. And I think a lot of people are that way. But you're saying every 20 minutes.
It doesn't have to be a lot, but the science is showing it's not the number of calories, because it's not a big caloric burn, but changing levels, going from sitting to standing, standing to down the stairs, up the stairs, sitting again. Doing something and changing levels will help change blood pressure and Just, it will help change the circulation pattern. And the other thing is, we all get tired throughout the day, and especially if you're sitting. And if you need a caffeine boost, if you're feeling thick-headed, if you're feeling dull, so many people go for the caffeine, or they go for some sugar, or they go for, I need to eat something to pick up my energy. What I go for, and I think I just try to train people, go for something that will shake it up. Do an inversion. And again, because I will do, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not doing handstands. And they're just 30 seconds, but it's like, zoom, the blood is going to the brain, And so instead of you cannot be tired after a 30-minute inversion. And it doesn't have to be on your hands. You can just go up the wall, put your feet, you're here, feet up the wall, and then you can actually be on the phone. I take whole conference calls with my feet up the wall, and I get a kick. I laugh because I think, I wonder if they know what I look like right now. You can be on a conference call, and if you don't have to be taking notes, if it's more of a creative call or something like that. Anyway,
I love it. No, it's so great. You're such an inspiration on so many levels.
I'm kind of nutty, but that's,
it's such good stuff. And that blood that flows throughout the body. So how do you provide fuel to your body? The movement, what kind of foods do you like to eat, and what have you learned over the years works best for you?
Sometime in the morning, I usually have some kind of protein shake. And again, and I mix it up depending on the seasons, everything else, but it's plants in there, it's my avocados, it's either a whey protein or a plant-based protein. I mix in some bone broth sometimes, but really it's mainly fish. I'm mainly for my protein, I go fish, I go eggs, I go whey, and then it is lots and lots of veggies. So women tend to worry about bulking up, and really most women don't have enough testosterone to bulk up, and again don't realize this atrophy that starts to happen, and it's minimal at first, but that's really the difference between a vital 50 plus year old and 40, 50 plus year old, 60-year-old is having that muscle mass, and that comes from some strength training, not a lot, which is great, but then having enough protein in your diet and making sure that you're getting good nutrients and enough protein throughout the day. So if you're going to the gym, don't think about more time the better. It's actually less time, more intensity. Just get in there and start to build so that you're not lifting those 3-pound weights. I used to have women say, oh, 3-pound weights, I can't lift anything else, or will I get bulky? And I'd ask them, how much did your baby weigh when it was born? And they go, 8 pounds. And how long before it weighed 15 pounds? Oh, within about a month. Okay, so you're lifting a 15, a 30 pound, you're lifting a baby, you're lifting your luggage that weighs 50 pounds. When you throw it on, that I throw my luggage on there, I go, oh my God, 49 pounds.
Yeah.
You're lifting this around, but you're gonna lift in the gym 3-pound weights. We gotta get women out of that mentality, because I would prefer them build up to lifting 15-pound weights and only doing 7 repetitions, as opposed to going, okay, 3 pounds, 30 minutes later.
Right. It's so interesting how the science is more and more supporting this. Have you been doing that forever? Has that been your philosophy?
Yes, it has been, although I love movement. I just want to qualify. I love movement.
Yeah.
So I love dance. I've done boxing, kickboxing DVDs. I've done Latin. I've done belly dance DVDs.
Wow.
If you could see me and so I love movement patterns. And I think I just encourage women and everybody, but especially women, to learn about their bodies. And even if you're 50 years old, you're going to be in this body for another 30, 40, whatever years. And it's, so it's nice to understand what muscles are. And it doesn't take a lot, but just like 10 minutes a day. So instead of just going through the motion, like this is a bicep curl. Okay, just imagine if this is a bicep curl, but what if I keep my shoulder back when I'm doing it and I outwardly rotate? And small little things like that can help you. Okay, I'm sitting at that desk, getting back to sitting at the desk. We're coming full circle. Okay, you're at your desk. You're sitting there. You got the weights underneath the desk. That 20-minute buzzer goes off. You pick them up. You outwardly rotate.
Ooh.
You just do 10 repetitions. Put your weights back down. You're back on the conference call.
Very nice.
Hello. Of course I'll sign that deal. No, whatever. It's starting to integrate all of this.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's an amazing body. You know, these are amazing bodies that we have, and they function really well. They're meant for high intensity at times, not all the time, but to push it, flush it out, flush all the stuff out, get a good the circulation going. It's good for the brain, it's good for the heart, it's good for the lungs.
So interesting, so exciting to learn all of this from you and to know that you have two amazing daughters that are athletes and one of them is an Olympian. And you're teaching us about walking and just moving and getting out there and building that energy. Kathy, you're an incredible inspiration. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really love you and love everything you're doing and love this whole project. So thank you for doing it.
She is great.
She really is. And she definitely follows all of the activities that she encourages other people to do. For example, one of her daughters is an Olympian. The other one is getting ready to run a half marathon with her right about now.
See, that shows you that, again, it's not so much about aging gracefully, it's living a full life.
That's right.
Absolutely. You know, our next guest is somebody that I actually ran into backstage at the Dr. Aha show, and then we've become friends because we keep communicating on one of the most important topics to everybody, and that's sleep. And that's Dr. Michael Bruce, right?
You're right. Sleep is such an important topic, and I love that Dr. Michael Bruce has spent his entire career focusing on ways that we can regenerate when we're sleeping, that we can actually impact our weight.
And you know, this is really the most important thing for all of us to pay attention to. Look, take a look at this.
Dr. Michael Bruce, it's an incredible pleasure and honor to have you here today.
Thank you.
Now, millions of Americans refer to you as America's sleep doctor.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your background and how you would get this name.
So it wasn't by choice. It kind of sort of happened. I didn't grow up saying, hey, I want to be a sleep doctor. It was kind of funny. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I'm board certified in clinical sleep disorders, which means I took the medical specialty board without going to medical school and passed. So I'm one of 168 people in the world who've actually ever done something like that. But backing up a little bit, when I was doing my residency program, we had a choice. You could do different rotations, and somebody said, oh, you should check out the sleep rotation. I thought, well, I'm a pretty decent sleeper. It sounds kind of interesting. I might as well give it a shot. So I got there, and literally by the third day, I absolutely fell in love with clinical sleep medicine. You know, I have a really unique opportunity. You know, when you look at clinical psychology from a historical perspective, it can take weeks, months, even years before you see treatment gains in your patients. I help people like this. It's amazing. I mean, sometimes in literally 24 hours, we can identify a problem, have the right protocol, fix it, and people are sleeping again.
It's remarkable to think about how much time we spend sleeping.
Right.
And yet we know
Or not.
or not, right? And it seems like we kind of just don't know that much about it at the end of the day.
Well, and you know, the interesting thing is we still don't know why we sleep, right? Science hasn't figured that out. We know there's a couple of cool things that happen during sleep. So number one, we know that we move memory from our short-term memory to our long-term memory, for example, during REM sleep. Our brain then creates this sort of organizational substructure where we can pull that information back out when we need it to answer a question, or if we're on a test, or having a conversation. So we know sleep helps with memory. We know that sleep actually helps with metabolism, and I know we're going to talk a lot about that. We know that sleep actually has a big effect on our reaction time. We know that sleep has a big effect on our moods. As an example, we know that when you're sleep deprived, you're more depressed if you have depression. You're more anxious if you have anxiety. So sleep is truly fundamental to almost every aspect of health. I mean, I think I can honestly sit here and tell you that it affects every organ system and every disease state. I would be willing to go on record and say that everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Fascinating. So how does it impact the metabolic syndrome or not?
Right.
Just overall, what is the impact on our metabolism?
So it's really interesting. I was very fortunate. I wrote a book called The Sleep Doctor's Diet, Lose Weight Through Better Sleep, and started really investigating this. So I've got a lot of deep knowledge on this. So here's how it breaks down. So when you become sleep deprived, several different things happen in your body. The very first thing that happens in your body is your metabolism slows down.
Okay, so when we become sleep deprived, can you define that?
That's a good point, right?
Yeah.
Because I guess it's different for
Right.
everybody. So my sleep deprivation might not be the same as
Oh,
yours.
really?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, 8 hours is a myth. All right? We said it here. Everybody can hear it. Everybody can see it. 8 hours is a myth. People don't always need the exact same amount of sleep. As an example, I've been a 6.5-hour sleeper my entire adult life, but my wife, she needs 8.5 hours, right? So if she got my 6.5, she would be sleep deprived. Whereas if I got my 6.5, I would be just fine. So we know that that's different for different people.
And what is it? It's based on the rhythm? Can
Well,
you
so
tell us?
there's a couple of things it's based on. So one, it is genetically predetermined. So our genes, actually our DNA, can tell us not only how much sleep we need, but when to
Interesting.
sleep. So, some people can be an early bird and some people can be a night owl, and that has to do with circadian rhythms and things like that. But generally speaking, we know that sleep deprivation, as a general definition, is probably anything less than 6 hours a night, generally speaking, if you need more. So if you know that your body, let's say, needs 7 hours and you only get 6, you're sleep deprived. So that 1 hour each week that you lose, or 1 hour each day that you lose, you become sleep deprived. And that's when your metabolism really starts to slow down.
And is that after one day? So if I don't, like, for example, I
Right.
did not, I was telling you ahead of time, I didn't sleep well last night.
Right.
I am sleep deprived today by a
Correct.
couple of hours.
Right.
And that has to do with jet lag and so forth.
Certainly.
Am I in that state, and has my
You are.
metabolism slowed down?
It has.
Oh, wow.
So it happens that quickly, but it compounds over time. So if, let's say your body needs, we'll just pick a number, 7 hours, and you only get 6 hours for a consistent period of time, there's data to show that your body actually becomes insulin resistant within 36 to 48 hours.
Wow.
It's that fast. Sleep is that whole nourishment, that it's the whole body. Sleep is healing, right? And when you're not healing, your metabolism really starts to move into gear. And what's interesting, we think that the reason metabolism actually slows down when you become sleep deprived is because it's trying to conserve resources, right? Your brain is saying, I'm not sure why I'm awake, but whatever's going on in my belly, I need to keep it there because I don't know, I might need those resources later. That's only the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is hunger increases. Right? Actually, appetite increases first. And by the way, appetite and hunger are two different things. Appetite increases. Why? Because your brain is saying, I need more resources. I'm awake. I don't know why I'm awake yet, but I think I need to get some more food in here because who knows why I'm awake. I might need some quick energy. So we're already in a weird place. We're in a high appetite, low metabolism. That already isn't a good idea for weight loss or even maintaining a healthy weight. Then something happens with your hormones, which is really interesting. The data has become very, very consistent now. We know that there's 2 hormones in particular that have a big effect on weight. So when you become sleep deprived, your ghrelin actually increases by about 20%. Ghrelin, I think of it as the go hormone because ghrelin starts with G and go starts with G, and it has a lot to do with hunger. So remember, appetite and hunger are 2 different things. Ghrelin actually increases that level of hunger as you get sleep deprived. Leptin, which is a hormone that we know has a lot to do with weight loss, actually lowers by almost 15%. So picture this. I've got high appetite. I've got more ghrelin, so high hunger. I've got less leptin, which makes me feel full, so I don't feel as full, and my metabolism has slowed down. I mean, come on, this is getting worse and worse, but I'm not done. Oh no, there's more.
Oh, wow.
So now, cravings. What happens to your cravings? This is very interesting. Your cortisol level increases when you become sleep deprived. That's why the appetite increases. Your brain doesn't like it when your cortisol is high, high, high for extended periods of time. So your brain says to your other part of your brain, so the front part says to the back part, we need to do something to lower this cortisol. How do they do that? If I eat high fat, high caloric, high carbohydrate foods, it increases serotonin and makes that whole thing settle. So now here we are, we're sleep deprived, we have high appetite, high hunger, our food choices turn to high caloric, high fat foods, and our ability to feel full is less because of leptin, and our metabolism is lower. I mean, honestly, I don't think it could be a much worse situation.
Okay, so you've spoken a little bit about hunger and appetite as 2 different things. Can you define it for us?
Sure. So when we look at appetite, appetite is sort of this drive that an individual has looking for food. It's really more in your head than it actually is in your gut. Hunger is something that you would feel systemically. That's where you get hunger pains, that kind of thing. And those are actually 2 different processes. So, appetite is really more cortisol driven, right? And that's because you become sleep deprived and your cortisol level jacks up because it doesn't know why you're awake. And when you have more ghrelin, that actually drives the hunger side of things. So it's sort of two sides of the same coin working together.
Fascinating. So tell me a little bit more about once we get into this state of sleep deprivation,
Right.
and what we do typically in that state. Like, what are the kinds of foods that we go for? Tell me a little
Sure.
more.
So the more sleep deprived we become, the more we crave high carbohydrate foods. Right. I know, it's kind of shocking. Your eyes just popped. You're
Right.
like, what are you talking about,
Yes.
Michael? But think about it. When you're sleep deprived, I mean, you said you didn't get great sleep last
Right.
night. What are you kind of thinking that you might want to eat right now?
Right? Something to jack me up.
Exactly. So you're going to go for the Snickers bar or the donut or what have you. The reason that we do that is because our brain doesn't like the fact that cortisol is high. And so it wants to produce serotonin to quiet that. The easiest way to produce serotonin is to eat high carbohydrate, high sugar foods. And that's what we do, is we reach for that piece of bread, or we reach for that donut or that cupcake or that muffin or what have you. Of course, they're loaded with calories and not the kind of calories that we're looking for.
This is all very, very interesting. I don't think that many people recognize the impact on our metabolism through 1 or 2 nights of not being able to sleep, even within 1 hour.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And this is probably historically one of the reasons why diets haven't worked so well for so many people. If you're a person out there and you've tried 3, 4, 10 different diets, the reason that they haven't been really on point for you, they might not have been right for you to begin with, but sleep is kind of that secret weapon, that hidden factor that you've got to include when you're looking at healthy weight or weight loss.
This seems like really new information. I mean, I'm always on the cutting edge and paying attention to
are.
everything, and yet I haven't heard this before at this level, broken down in this way.
Well, and here's the truth of the matter is it's taken a while to get all this research together. I mean, what I just condensed in just a few minutes is probably 15 years
Right.
of really solid research that's been going on at multiple institutions around the world. So I think we're finally at the time where we can do that. And it makes a lot of sense, especially in your program, that you included sleep into it.
Yeah.
Because you are on the cutting edge, and you did say, hey, I want my viewers and I want my readers and I want everybody out there who's going to be reading my material to know and understand that if you want to know what is the skinny on fat, you need to know about sleep.
It's so important. And I think just this understanding that we can get off track and impact our metabolism by 15% or more in different ways
Oh, yes.
that quickly and that easily. So what are some very simple strategies that we could start using tonight
Sure.
that could transform our health and maybe even help with our metabolism?
All right, so I'm going to give everybody a 5-step method that they can start tonight.
Awesome.
Now I'm going to tell everybody out there, don't forget that in the book there is an entire program surrounding sleep. So if you really want to get into that, which I highly recommend, because I'm telling people if you want to go the full on, but here's the quick one that you can do right now tonight. So step number 1 is to have a consistent sleep schedule. Wake up time turns out to be more important than going to bed time. So if you wake up at 6:30 during the week, I know this isn't going to be too popular, but I want you to wake up at 6:30 on Saturday and 6:30 on Sunday. It turns out that your circadian rhythm, which is your internal biological clock, resets every morning. And if you don't reset it at the exact same time, it becomes inconsistent, and that affects the quality of the sleep that you're getting. I have some patients who would get in bed early, get in bed late, wake up early, and because of that, the quality of their sleep was all over the place. But by really keeping those parameters tight, you will find that number 1, you will need less sleep overall, and the quality of your sleep will increase. So step number 1 is 1 consistent wake-up time. Step number 2 has to do with caffeine. I know people are going to be, oh my gosh, here goes the sleep doctor. He's going to tell us not to drink caffeine. No, I'm not going to say that. Okay, it's okay to drink caffeine. However, you really need to think about slowing down or even stopping caffeine by about 2 p.m. Why did I choose 2? So it turns out that caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. Right? And so if you stop at 2, by 8 hours later, 10 o'clock, about half of that caffeine is going to be out of your system, which is good because it allows you to fall asleep a little bit easier. Now, I know there's somebody out there watching this who's going to be like, sleep doctor, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I can have a cappuccino at dinner and fall right to sleep. So here's what I'm going to tell you is different people have different caffeine sensitivities, but for that individual that wants to have the cappuccino with dinner, if I put electrodes all over their head, they might fall asleep, but they're not getting into deep sleep.
Interesting.
Right? So the quality of their sleep is really compromised. And that's why people wake up and they don't feel so good, is because of that sleep quality. So step number 2 is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number 3 has to do with alcohol. So I'm not going to tell you that you can't have your wine or your beer or your cocktail with dinner, but a couple things to think about. It takes the average human body approximately 1 hour per alcoholic beverage that you drink to digest it and metabolize through it. So if you want to have 1 or 2 glasses of wine or beer or spirits with dinner, I don't have a problem with that, but give your body the opportunity to metabolize it out. Why? Because there's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out. Right? And we don't want people passing out. We want people going to sleep, still enjoying their meal, and still being able to have a good night's rest. So step number 3 is 3 hours before lights out, you want to stop alcohol. Step number 4 has to do with exercise. The single biggest way for you to improve the quality of your sleep is to exercise. Now, I'm not talking about running a marathon here. 20 minutes of daily exercise. Walk the dog, get the mail, walk around the block, whatever it is you want to do. Or, hey, go to a spin class and go all out. It doesn't matter to me. The data is really consistent. More exercise equals better quality sleep. However, it turns out that some people can't exercise too close to bedtime. It revs them up too much. So step number 4 is to stop exercise 4 hours before bed to allow your body to be able to still calm down and get the rest it needs. I will tell you though, there's a group of people out there that actually do better exercising late at night. So that step is one that's got a little bit of a caveat to it in terms of if you know that you're an evening exerciser and it doesn't affect your sleep, then you're probably just fine. Step number 5, my last step, is that you want to get 15 minutes of sunlight every morning when you wake up. So it turns out that when sun comes in and hits the optic nerve, it bounces around and it ends up in your circadian rhythm and resets your brain by turning off the melatonin faucet in your head, right? And remember, melatonin is sort of that key that starts the engine for sleep. So we really want to make sure that that's turned off when we wake up in the morning. So really quickly, in summary, step number 1 is have 1 wake-up time. Be consistent 7 days a week. Step number 2, stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number 3, give yourself 3 hours before lights out after your last drink. Step number 4 is exercise daily, but give yourself 4 hours before lights out so your body can calm down. And step number 5 is to get 15 minutes of sunlight every morning.
So exciting to be able to have 5 points, and we'll apply them,
Absolutely.
right away and get benefits. You mentioned circadian rhythm.
I did.
And I know that in 2017, the Nobel Prize was won for circadian. Can you give us a bit of an overview and why? Why would the Nobel Prize be in this area?
This is fascinating. So first of all, a lot of people don't know how sleep works. So it turns out that there are 2 systems in the brain that make us fall asleep. One is a drive, just like hunger, right? So I'm hungry. I eat something, and that hunger dissipates. The same holds true with sleep. So as our body is going throughout the day, when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through the system and goes to a very specific receptor site in your brain. As more and more adenosine builds up, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. As a side note, I know I'm a little geeked out here. If you looked at the compound of adenosine, it's 1 molecule off of the compound of caffeine.
Wow.
I know, people don't know that. So when you drink caffeine, it fits into that receptor site and can block that adenosine, which is why you don't feel sleepy when you drink caffeine. But aside from that, when you have a buildup of adenosine, you get sleepy. There's a second system called your circadian rhythm. So you ever notice how you get hungry at breakfast time, lunchtime, and dinner time? The same holds true with sleep. So what's really interesting here is most people get sleepy somewhere between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. That's by design of your body. So when your sleep drive is high and your circadian rhythm is in sync, no problems. But if either one of these is off, that's when you have a sleep disorder. So circadian rhythms play a critical role. It's not just all about sleep drive, it's a lot about timing.
Fascinating. So it's a lot about timing, and it's such an important topic in today's environment when we think about the Nobel Prize in Medicine really being given to this area of study. So what do you think we're going to discover over the next couple of years? I just am curious, like what goes on in your brain?
So I think circadian rhythms are going to become even more important. So as an example, I work in doctors' clinics, right, where I see patients sometimes. And one of the things that we know is that in a lot of clinics, you give specimen samples, right? So urine, blood, what have you. I think what we're going to start seeing is what time did they draw the specimen is going to have a big effect, because remember, all of these hormones are on a very distinct pattern. If you got your blood drawn at 8 o'clock in the morning versus 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you could have very different amounts of, let's say, thyroid hormone in your system, right? Or estrogen or testosterone, things that people are measuring on a very frequent basis. So I think the norms are going to start to change. Like morning draw for thyroid is going to have a different normative value than evening draw, because people are getting misdiagnosed all the time. And I think part of it has to do with the idea of circadian rhythms and when are we taking those specimens. That's one thing. So we're talking cutting edge medicine here.
Right.
Here's another one that I thought was unbelievable. We now know that cancer cells multiply twice as fast the more sleep deprived you are. Twice as fast. Okay, so this is real science, real medicine, real serious stuff here. We also know that when you administer chemotherapy, if you administer at a very particular time in a person's 24-hour cycle, you need less chemo and it works better. Less poison in the system works better.
Dr. Bruce, is this really new information?
It's new information. It's definitely cutting edge information. Some of the most progressive cancer centers in the world are now actually adopting very specific schedules to be able to administer chemotherapy, because again, less chemo is better for the body, and when it's more effective, you really can't go wrong.
So sleep deprivation is not just about the metabolism, it's about every single area of our health and disease.
It is. I mean, I was saying before, it affects every organ system, every disease state. We know our immune system doesn't function well without sleep. Remember, sleep is healing, right? Why would we deprive our body of the chance to heal? We shouldn't, right? That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. We're trying to live longer lives, healthier lives, have more energy during the day. One of the fundamental aspects of that is sleep. Sleep is so important. Let me give you some parameters here. You can only go 3 days without water. You can only go 7 days without sleep.
That's very interesting and surprising when you think about it, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, you would think you could go long. No, 7 days and you're...
Wow. Well, it's fascinating to learn all of this, and thank you for being America's sleep doctor.
You're very welcome.
It's incredible.
Thank you for having me on here, and I am super excited to be part of this. This has been a great honor to be here, and I'm wishing everybody out there sweet dreams.
See, I mean, good quality sleep is something that we all require, but it's not just about rejuvenation, right?
Right. What did you think about when Dr. Bruce told us that just 1 hour of lost sleep can put us into a place of sleep deprivation, which impacts our metabolism? I had no idea.
It makes you stop and listen, I like the fact that our next guest has kind of really combined multiple disciplines. That's Dr. Hasselblas, right?
You're right. So she's a professor of kinesiology, and she has her PhD in exercise psychology. And what makes Dr. Hasselblas so very interesting is she teaches us all sorts of different ways that we can move that has an impact on our health.
Well, take a look at this.
Dr. Heather Hasselblas, it's wonderful to be able to have you here. Thank you for making the time. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your background, if you could share some of the research that you've done and what got you into the world of exercise.
Thanks, Naomi. I'm thrilled to be here. It's really been a lifelong journey. As a kid, I was very physically active. I had 2 brothers, played a lot of sports, and I coupled that with being fascinated by human behavior, why people did or did not do certain things. So when I got to university, I was actually studying psychology, and I kind of married the two together and got into this field. And at the time when I got into it, it was really an up-and-coming field, very new, called exercise psychology, where I took what I learned in psychology and then applied it to physical activity and exercise to try to understand really how it made you feel psychologically, why so many people don't do something that is so good for them, and if they can actually do it too much as well.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because in this country, with the amount of obesity and overweight being so incredibly prevalent, how does exercise fit into that?
plays a key role because you can't really, it's, I think, very difficult to separate exercise and diet. They go together. How we move and what we're eating are probably two of the key behaviors that affect our health. And if you take a look at what the science says, it's really clear. The top three behaviors that impact our health are whether you smoke or not, what you eat, and how much you move. And we're at an unprecedented time in mankind where we just, for the first time really in human history over the last, about 50 years, we just don't move enough. And you couple that with what we're eating, and we have got not only this obesity pandemic, but we also have a physical inactivity pandemic as well. And if this continues, it's going to cripple the healthcare system. The healthcare system is just not going to be able to keep up. We need to change what we're eating, and we need to change how much we move.
Why do you think over the past 50 years we've seen this transition, this major transition? Because so many of the researchers speak to that same transition over the past 50 years with food. And so I'd love to get your perspective on how it relates to the exercise and the movement.
Well, what's happened, you take a look over the last 50, even 100 years, I feel like we have engineered physical activity out of our day with all the modern gadgets and technology that we love that makes our life so easy. It makes our lives too easy. And then we're not moving enough. Even from as simple as, and this may sound a little silly, but how we brush our teeth. Now we have, the manual toothbrush, which takes away that little bit of physical activity. And over the course of weeks, months, and years, that begins to add up. You take a look at how we travel now. We used to walk, we used to bike to get from A to B. Now we have cars. Things are a lot more spread out with all the modern technology that we have. Even a simple thing like a can opener and how we open a can, and we sit, and that is critical. We say now we have a sitting disease going on where the average person will spend upwards of 8 to 10 hours a day just sitting. And not only sitting, but you couple that in front of some type of a screen. So we're losing so much time from what I call this incidental physical activity, where back 150 years ago, people weren't going to a gym because it didn't exist. They were getting their physical activity just to get through their day. They were walking, get how they got their food through farming. Now we just go to a grocery store and we drive to the grocery store. And what are we buying at the grocery store? Processed food. We want things that are quick and easy. And that is really what has happened to our society with how we move and what we're eating.
This point about the sitting disease, tell us more, because I've actually never heard this term of a sitting disease. I've heard that sitting could be considered as the new smoking, and I'd love to know a little more.
Yeah, so it's really what you see a paradigm shift occurring. So over the last let's say about 20, 30 years, you see now that we're sitting so much more. And it used to be the belief that we needed to exercise to get these health benefits. And you'd have to go to the gym, and it would need to be vigorous physical activity, get your heart rate up. And it's really difficult to talk to the person beside you when you're doing it. Most people don't like it. If you don't like it, you're not going to do it. And the guidelines were established for that. And most people felt like a failure if they wouldn't meet these guidelines. And what's happening now with how the transition with jobs and how we sit so much, whether it's kids sitting in front of, some type of a screen, or people at work and they're in front of their screen, the science now is beginning to show that this kind of what we call this light or this mild physical activity is really, really important for our health. And that encompasses most of our day. So the whole process, what we say, if you sit for longer than an hour, we call that extended sitting. And that's not good for you. So you should try to get up every hour at least, even if you stand for a minute or two. That's going to have major health benefits. So it's not like you need to be going to the gym. What you should do, and I tell people, put a little reminder on your computer screen. So every hour a little alarm goes off. All you need to do is stand for a minute or two, maybe take a walk around the office, have walking meetings, stand and talk on your phone, and that's going to have huge health benefits. One of the most fascinating studies I read was this long-term study that took a look at people in their sitting over the course of a year and had them stand a little bit more during the day, not an extreme amount. And what they found that the group that stood more during the day and didn't change anything else, not their diet, not their physical activity level, by the end of the year lost upwards of 8 to 10 pounds compared to the other group that just continued with their normal behaviors and their typical sitting. So
8 to 10
8
pounds.
to 10 pounds. And what I try to tell people is, it's the power of these little things that we do that add up over time. And we want instant gratification. We want to know right away, okay, in the first week, I want to lose 5 to 10 pounds. Well, that's not sustainable in the long period. You've got to do things that are going to change your lifestyle. You change your behaviors that way, and that's where you're going to have those sustainable outcomes where you'll be healthier in the long period. I say to people, it's not that difficult to stand more during the day. It doesn't take time out of your day to do that because you don't have to change your clothes to stand more during the day and put on your workout clothes. All you need to do is stand. And it's as simple as that. So you see this paradigm shift occurring now that not only do we have these physical activity guidelines, but now certain countries are coming up with sitting guidelines for how long we should be sitting. We should be sitting during the day. And I call it almost this double whammy that occurs. So not only do you need to, exercise almost daily where you get your heart rate up a little bit at a moderate to vigorous level, but you also need to be standing more during the day as well. And the science is very clear that we have what I call active couch potatoes. So you have people who meet the physical activity guidelines. So let's say they go to the gym and they work out for an hour, maybe 30 minutes, a few times a week, but yet they spend the rest of their day sitting. That has significant negative health effects. So the science is clear on the health effects of sitting too much. There have been large-scale meta-analyses that have been done showing that people who sit more during the day are more at risk for most chronic diseases that we have: diabetes, stroke, heart disease, obesity, and they're also more likely to die prematurely, meaning that people who sit more are more likely to die at a younger age than people who stand more during the day. And what we did at Jacksonville University, we decided to take a look at college students because it's really that transitional period in people's lives. And college students, when they're in class, they're sitting, and they spend upwards of typically 15 hours in lecture. So we designed a study where we had stand-up desks brought into your typical lecture hall, and we compared it to a group of students in your traditional sitting class over the course of a semester. What we found is that the students who stood more with the standing desk, they actually had a higher GPA, a higher average in the class, so they did better. And they also attended more to the instructor. So they were less likely to be looking around on their phone, being distracted, talking to somebody else. So what we do know, not only do you see all of these health-related benefits, but there's also cognitive benefits as well. As people are more focused and they get more work done, and then the end product is that they're performing better. So it's really quite fascinating. You see this movement now towards standing desks, that people will use even treadmill types of desks, and the science now is beginning to show all of these incredible health effects associated with it. Unfortunately, most people spend the vast majority of their day sitting, and that's really how our environment is structured. When you go to a restaurant, you're sitting. When you go to a movie theater, you're sitting. When you're at work, you're sitting. You go to a meeting, you're sitting. So what we need to do is kind of almost be sneaky about it. And a lot of people will, as well as myself, have walking meetings. So instead of having somebody come into my office and we sit, why not just go for a walk? You don't need to change your clothes. Sometimes I actually will change my shoes. But what it does is just gets people moving a little more and gets them standing. People are more creative actually at this point as well. So it's really a win-win, and it does not take any additional time out of the day, because what we find in my research shows, and several others, is that the number one reason why people say they don't exercise is because they don't have the time. I say, well, they actually do have the time. I feel that's more of an excuse when you take a look at actually people's day and how much time people actually spend in front of a screen. So it's a matter of just reframing how people think about things and kind of sneaking it into their day.
So going for a walking meeting or standing up, having a standing desk, how much can that really do for our health? And what is sort of that point where you're getting real benefits? And can you talk a little bit about what those benefits really are?
Yeah, the benefits will almost be instant, but it's not going to be dramatic. And that's the challenge, because people like dramatic change. They want to see that, okay, I've started to do this and I'm going to lose 10 pounds in the first month, or my body's going to change and I'm just going to look so much more muscular and so much more fit. That's not the case. It takes a long time. And I say what works is these lifestyle changes that people incorporate, and be aware that the years go by quickly, and before you know it, it'll be the new year again. So it's really important for people to understand, understand the time that it takes to incorporate these and make these changes.
So once we start to incorporate these things, what is actually going on physically, and are we burning more fat? How does it work?
Yeah, you'll definitely be burning more fat. You're kind of, and I say like revving up your system, where your body is doing what it needs to be doing. And when that happens, then from a psychological standpoint, you begin to feel better. And when you feel better and you're enjoying it, you're more likely to do it. From the research that I've done and other people have done from an exercise standpoint, the science behind the physiological effects of physical activity are very, very clear. When you exercise, it pretty much has a positive impact on every single system in your body. And most people that you ask, upwards of 95% of people, if you ask them, is exercise good for you? They're going to say yes. They know that it's good for them, but knowledge is not enough. And that's where the psychology comes into play, to try to understand why people are not exercising, what is the motivation behind it, and how can we get them to move more during the day. A lot of people that I have had in research studies say, I don't exercise because I'm just too tired. I'll say, well, believe it or not, the research is clear from what I've done and others that after you exercise, you actually report that you have more energy and that you feel better. So it's trying to get people to understand these effects that happen, but people need to enjoy it, and that is key. That if you engage in regular physical activity, even if it's just a single bout, after that, you're going to report that you're less anxious, that you're in a better mood, that you're less depressed, you're less stressed, even that you feel better about your body, which is really, really important. So these are all of these psychological health effects that couple the physiological effects of regular physical activity.
So when we're able to incorporate these standing meetings, these different activities, just getting up from our desk once an hour, maybe even having a standing desk, we're dramatically impacting our health, but it's over time from what you're saying. And then the emotional or the psychological effect that then ultimately has is what continues to give us that momentum. Because I know, like, for me, when I start to exercise, if I've taken a couple of days off or whatever it may be, I get this burst of positive energy and I feel so much better. And then that just continues to build.
And that's a good point. A lot of people will say that are regularly physically active, what keeps them going is that they know how they're going to feel once they're done. Oftentimes the process itself may not be the most pleasurable, going to the gym and working out, but when you're done, it's that sense of accomplishment and that sense that you're going to feel so much better, and it's going to stick with you throughout the day. So for example, if you exercise first thing in the morning, guarantee that right after it's going to put you in a better mood. And that's going to carry with you throughout the day as well, and that's really important. Some studies have shown that these positive mood effects can last upwards of a day or two and stick with people. And I think what's really powerful is it's not just for your average healthy person, it's also for people who have chronic health conditions, whether they have diabetes, whether they have obesity, cancer as well. Engaging in physical activity is really, really important and has a whole host of health benefits. What I'd like to tell people, especially if they're overweight or obese, still need to move. That is so important, because it is healthier to be overweight or obese and be physically active than to be sedentary and thin or skinny. So that movement is so important. And this leads to the whole point of how we need to move and the importance of it. And you can take it from an evolutionary standpoint. Way back, I say in the caveman days, we moved and we had to. And now we don't, and that's not how our body is designed. It's designed to move, and it doesn't necessarily need to be this vigorous physical activity. It's even as simple as fidgeting. There was a fascinating study that was done. It was a weight loss study. And it found that not everybody in the weight loss study lost the same amount of weight, and they could not understand why. And they went back to the actual fine levels of movement that people were doing. They found that certain individuals just fidgeted more during the day. And those people that fidgeted more actually lost a significant amount of weight. And they did a spin on the study where it was actually groups got the same amount of calories, and it was actually to put on weight. It was a weight gain study, which is very unusual. They found that certain groups of individuals were not gaining weight, even though they're consuming the same amount of calories. And when you take a look at the movement, it was those individuals were compensating for it, certain ones by fidgeting more, not even aware of it, but it's how their bodies were designed to compensate for those extra calories. So sometimes we make things so much more complex than they need to be. And we need to come back to the basics and listen to our bodies and what makes us feel good, and keep it simple. We get so caught up in all these different types of exercises and fitness crazes and things that we need to do and different types of exercise equipment that we need to buy. And the same thing with diets. Not every diet is going to work for everybody. We need to eat well for the most part, as much as we can, and incorporate as much movement as we can into our day. And that is so important. And people who are trying to lose weight struggle with that. And I say, you take a look at our guidelines. So we should be moving about 30 minutes a day at least a moderate intensity. If someone's trying to lose weight, they need to double that. And that's a challenge to try to fit in that hour every day, because it's so difficult to lose weight and sustain it over the long period of time.
So when you're taking an hour of movement, so what kind of physical movement? More intense to lose weight? Because I want to really sort of break it down. So many people in our country are trying to lose weight through exercise, and I hear it time and time again. I just can't lose that weight. And if the focus were to be maybe more on the food, perhaps the weight loss would be that much easier. And I'd love to understand the relationship of exercise to weight loss and that of food to weight loss.
And it's a good question, and it's an important one, and there's so many misconceptions about it. To lose weight, it's largely coming down to what you're eating, calories in and calories out. And yes, the exercise is going to play an important role, but it's not the most important. It comes down to what you're eating. The exercise plays a key role, but it's really the food that you're eating. And this is so important because people think, well, I can eat whatever I want during the day because it's okay because I went to the gym for an hour. No, that is not the case at all. And people feel, and you see these more extreme types of exercise that people do, the very intense, physical activity that most people do not like. And I say, you know what, you have to do what you like to be able to sustain it over the long period. And out of all the types of physical activity, the one that makes the most sense, and the science is very clear from not only people more likely to adhere to it, but a whole host of incredible health benefits, is walking. And we all can walk. We all have this ability. We can all incorporate it into our day. And that is really it's really the key. It's not, the Ironman or the marathon that those select few are doing. It's incorporating more walking into your day, I think, is one of the best things that people can do.
And that will help us lose weight?
Oh, help you lose weight. You're going to feel better. It's going to have a positive effect on every system pretty much in your body, not only from a physiological standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint as well. And it's easy to do. So once again, it's coming back to the basics. You see these different types of exercises that are coming out, and yeah, they're going to have certainly health benefits, but people just tend to get bored and are not going to stick with it in a long period. So it's coming back to just the walking. And what we like to say is this exercise is medicine, which is this, now it's an international intervention, health-based intervention coming from the American College of Sports Medicine, stating that when you go to the doctors, you should also be assessed for your physical activity level as a vital sign. So when we go to the doctors, we get our blood pressure, our heart rate checked, your pain level, but we need to tack on exercise as a vital sign. And if you're not meeting the physical activity guidelines, then you're given a prescription for physical activity and for movement. And coming from a physician is very powerful, but also very much a challenge, because movement and exercise tends to be more of a preventative measure than a treatment. And there's not a lot of money resulting from prevention. So that's really a challenge. And the way that I like to take a look at it, I said, if you could couple all the health benefits of exercise and put it in a pill form, it'd be the most powerful pill out there. And it would almost be malpractice for physicians not to prescribe it. But once again, because it's a behavior that we do, and it's not that easy fix of taking a pill, that's where the challenge arises.
And because it doesn't cost anything and we can just take the time.
Yeah.
So are you saying walking for 30 minutes a day is sort of that sweet spot?
The sweet spot is anything really above 10 minutes. Yeah. And that's, and people have this feeling that, it has to be at least 30 minutes or it has to be at least an hour. And the science is clear that little is better than nothing. And it tends to be about, at least at that 10-minute mark of moderate walking, that's where you get a huge amount of benefit. And really, once you get past that 30-minute mark, it's kind of this diminishing return. You get the most health benefits really between almost that 15 to 30 minutes. And then people who are engaging in physical activity, an hour or two a day, that's almost this point of diminishing return where you see people are doing nothing. You see this, dramatic increase. And by the time you hit about 30 minutes, it begins to plateau off. To the point where probably there's a point where people could be exercising too much where it's unhealthy for them. So, and that's really important for people to understand that it doesn't have to be extreme. Get up and go for a 10-minute walk in the morning, 10-minute walk at lunch, 10-minute walk in the evening, and you've actually hit the guidelines, the health-related guidelines for physical activity.
You're telling us that less can actually be more.
Less
Can be more. That's a really empowering thing. I think we all want to be able to hear that and know that, in fact, it's actually backed by science.
Yes, and that's the key, because people think, oh my goodness, I need to go and do this spin class for an hour, and that's what I need to be healthy. And that's not the case. That's great if people do it, but it is that less is more. From an eating standpoint and also from a physical activity standpoint. And now we're seeing an increase in the amount of people that we would potentially classify as engaging in excessive exercise or almost becoming addicted to exercise because of our society and we need to do more, and if a little bit of exercise is good for me, that an hour or 2 or 3 a day must be even better. And that's not the case. There's that point of, diminished return, really. And you think about even from healthy eating. If you're to become so extreme with your healthy eating and cut out like major food groups, that's not going to be healthy.
So what you're saying is that 10 minutes 3 times a day can be very effective. Is that the same? Do we get the same health benefits as if we were walking for 30 consecutive minutes?
Yeah, that's a good point. So it doesn't matter whether it's consecutive, so you do 30 minutes all at once, or you break it up into 3 10-minute bouts. As long as you're doing it and getting it in sometime within your day, then that is the power. And one of the reasons why scientists began to break up, exercise and take a look at it in smaller bouts was based on the fact that most people were saying, I don't have time during my day to do 30 minutes or to do an hour. So they began to take a look at what is the minimal amount of physical activity that people need to do to reap the health-related benefits. And the science is showing that it seems to be that 10 minutes is kind of that minimal sweet spot that you need to be doing and accumulating. And now it's at accumulating 150 minutes per week, which typically equates to about 30 minutes per day. So what could happen with individuals when they say, well, I just don't have a lot of time during the week, I'm really busy with work, they could actually on the weekend accumulate those 150 minutes just on the weekend alone, or they could spread it out during the week. But what is important is that people are getting at least 150 minutes a week of moderate physical activity. Now, if you want to increase that intensity to vigorous physical activity, cut it in half. So 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity. So you kind of get more bang for your buck. And you can, incorporate both moderate and vigorous. But what it does is it allows people to understand, because people are very much goal driven and can say, okay, now I know it's 150 minutes per week and I've got to incorporate it sometime throughout the week.
So tell us about moderate versus a more intense physical activity. Can you describe the two?
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand the distinction between them. The way I like to describe is by giving examples of different types of activities, because that helps people. So with a moderate physical activity, you're getting your heart rate up, but you're still able to talk to the person beside you. So it's still at a comfortable pace, but you are beginning to breathe a little more heavily. So I take a look at it as like a brisk walk. When you're out brisk walking, you're actually getting your hearts, your hands pumping. It's not just your strolling window shopping. That is not your vigorous physical activity or your moderate physical activity. Vigorous is when it becomes more difficult to talk to the person behind you. That would be going for example, a jog, maybe running on the treadmill, swimming laps, for example, playing singles tennis. would fall under that vigorous physical activity level.
You did an incredible study, which I was very excited to be part of at Jacksonville University, and it was a lifestyle study. Can you tell us a bit about it and what made it unique from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. It was actually really exciting because typically when we take a look at health behaviors from a research standpoint, we focus on just one. So we'll do a study and we focus just on exercise and what happens if people exercise, or what happens if we change people's diet, or what happens if we change people's sleep patterns. But very rarely do you see studies that incorporate multiple health behaviors together. And it only makes sense to do that because this is how our lives are. And probably one of the the most important health behaviors that we have besides not smoking are your diet, your physical activity, and your sleep. And we tend to forget about sleep. And if we're going to give up something during the day, it's going to be sleep. But sleep has so many positive health aspects, not only from a weight loss standpoint. Because when I'm counseling people and they're trying to lose weight, it's one of the first things I ask them: are you getting enough sleep? And if they say no, I'll say that's one of the first things that you need to change, you need to focus on. So with this lifestyle intervention, we actually incorporated 4 health behaviors, which is really unusual. I don't know of any other published studies that have taken a look at 4 health behaviors. So it was focusing on diet, physical activity, sleep, and also skincare. We tend to forget about our skin, the largest organ, and that plays such a key role in how we look. So we enrolled women into the study, and it was a 2-month health intervention where we tried to go in and modify and in a sense, to change what they were eating, how much they were sleeping, how much physical activity they did, and also a healthy skincare regimen. So I'm not a fan of low-calorie diets and people having to count their calories because it focuses, I feel, too much on what they're actually eating, and then they feel restricted. So with the intermittent fasting, and there's many different ways to do intermittent fasting, but within the study that we did, they would intermittent fast for 3 days during the week, and then the other 4 days they were allowed to eat. We said what they normally eat, but of course we wanted them to eat healthy, and we gave them some guidelines to follow. So during those 3 days when they did intermittent fasting, for 16 hours during the day or the night, they would not eat, and they were allowed to consume their calories within 8 hours. So typically what would happen is we tell them, after your last meal of the day, dinner, let's say it's at 6 o'clock, then you go to bed, and you're not eating when you're sleeping. You wake up, you skip breakfast, and then your first meal of the day is lunch. So that is the 16 hours of fasting, and then they consume the regular amount of calories during this 8-hour period. Now, when the women started off, I won't lie, the first week was a bit of a challenge because you're changing something. But they said that once they got to the end of the first week, they began to feel better. And they could see that it was having some type of effect. They actually felt like they had more energy. So that was the one aspect. So that was the diet. The other aspect was the exercise, where we actually, and this is often negated, the resistance training and the high intensity interval training, which is kind of brief, intense powers of physical activity that have a whole host of health benefits. So that was the exercise component. The sleep component was good sleep hygiene, where we were telling them about the importance of getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and telling them the importance of this is how you can go about to do it, setting up really healthy routines. And then they followed a skincare regimen both in the morning and at night. And then we did a whole host of assessments on them to make sure, really to see if the study was having any type of effect on their overall health. By the end of the study, what we found is that the women lost a significant amount of weight. They were sleeping better. They reported that my quality of sleep has improved so much more. They were a lot more fit, and we have proof for that as well. One of the most powerful outcomes that we had was an assessment called a bod pod, which assesses people's body composition. It's the gold standard, and it's based on air displacement. But what I really like about it is not only does it assess someone's weight, but it breaks it down to the percent body fat and the amount of mass, or the amount of weight that is made up of fat-free mass and also fat mass. So at the end of the study, some of the women were, I don't want to say disappointed, but they're like, oh, I thought I would have lost more weight than that. And on average, the women lost about 7 pounds on average. Over 2 months is really important. But what we did when we broke it down, they lost significantly more fat mass, which is what you want, upwards of about 9 to 10 pounds of fat mass, but they actually gained fat-free mass. So they gained muscle on their body, which is so important, and that was because of the exercise. So when you explain it to them in that terms, they're like, oh my gosh, that makes a lot of sense. Now I understand why exercise is so important to do and how it affects my body composition. And ultimately their percent body fat went down as well. And then from the skincare regimen, we had objective assessments of their fine lines and wrinkles, and every single woman in the study had improvement in their skin health, meaning that their fine lines, their wrinkles, their skin improved. So you couple this all together with all of these health behaviors, the women felt so much better, they looked better, they had more energy, they were sleeping better, and that is the power of coupling all of this together. And it's something that's sustainable for them, and they could understand when you said, this is why you do intermittent fasting. And we explained the science behind it and what was happening when people intermittent fast. It activates autophagy within their body, and we would explain that as cellular housekeeping, really cleaning out the junk within your cells and getting your body to do what it is supposed to do. And that would be the light bulb for them, and they say, okay, that makes sense now. So for them doing the intermittent fasting, that activated the autophagy. The type of exercise that they were doing, specifically the high intensity interval training and the resistance training, was activating autophagy. The skincare line was developed specifically to activate autophagy within the skin. And we do know it's very clear that when people get the right amount of sleep, that's 7 to 8 hours, that's ideal for autophagy activation, because if you're cutting your sleep short, then you're not getting all that cellular housekeeping that you can. So that was really the power of the study and the impact that it had. And I still see these women now from the study, and this is almost a year and a half later, and they're still talking about the power of the study and the effect that it had on their overall health.
It's remarkable to know that the Nobel Prize in Medicine was won in just 2016 for the mechanism of action around autophagy and how important it is on so many areas of our health and our well-being.
Right, it's really an emerging area, and once you see these leading scientists getting this recognition that this is having positive health effects and this is really important to study, then that's when you see things begin to change. And I'm hoping that 10 years from now, autophagy will be a household name, where antioxidants, are now a household name, and everybody knows about it. Well, they might not know exactly what antioxidants are, but they know, well, it's important, and I should be doing something related to antioxidants. I would like the same thing to happen, with autophagy and the power, of intermittent fasting and listening to your body and getting the right amount of sleep and doing this type of exercise for the sole reason that it's really cleaning out your cells, getting the junk out of your cells, and making your body do what it needs to, what it needs to do to make you healthy.
Tell us a little bit about these types of exercises. Can you go into some detail and how long the women were exercising?
Yeah, it wasn't an extreme amount. So it was only 4 days a week for 20 to 30 minutes that they would need to be doing the resistance training or the high intensity interval training. And they did the resistance training twice a week, and the high intensity interval training twice a week. And they could do this in the comfort of their own home. And this is the beauty of this program. Some of them were coming to the gym where we had that set up, but we also showed them how to do it at home. So the resistance training is just taking some light weights. It doesn't have to be like these super heavy, weights that you see that people are doing in the gym, and they're so uncomfortable when they're doing it. No, that's not the case. Just some light hand weights where they're doing, the bicep curls, the tricep curls, and the lunges, and repeating that. So doing it, sets of 3. So that would be the resistance training. The high intensity interval training, that's a little more uncomfortable for people, but the benefits are incredible, and people feel so good once they're done. And that's doing kind of these quick, high intense bouts of an activity for 30 seconds or a minute, and then taking a break and then going back and doing it again. So it's like doing your burpees, for example, or these powerful types of like jumping lunges where you really get your heart rate up. But it's not sustainable, over a long period, and they do over about 20 to 30 minutes. And that was key. We tend to forget about the importance of these types of exercises, and we've focused on the aerobic types of exercise. But the resistance training
And the strength training is very important for, not only our bone health, but our overall health as well, and from a weight loss standpoint as well, because that is key really to improving the fat-free mass within your body.
So when you talk about the interval training, you can also do it with walking. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you see this even from a walk jog standpoint as well. So you're walking, you increase the intensity of it, and then you slow it down. And that is so important. Kind of this consistent, let's say, running or walking at the same pace is certainly good for you. But it's even better if you increase your speed for, let's say, a minute or two, and then bring it back to a more comfortable level for you. And that is really important. It's important that we make things a little bit uncomfortable, and you tax your body a little bit, but it does not need to be extreme.
The Nobel Prize in Medicine this year was won for the circadian rhythm. And I know that there's been a lot of research around sleep and exercise. Can you share the connection with us?
Yeah, definitely. And it's really a fascinating area of research. And a lot of people say, the reason why I don't exercise is because I don't have the time. And the only time I can exercise is in the evening. And if I exercise and get my heart rate up, then I'm not going to be able to fall asleep. And that's not the case. There's been some fascinating studies that have taken a look at when people exercise, whether it's in the morning, the afternoon, late in the evening, change the intensities of the types of exercise. And the science is clear. It doesn't matter when you exercise, just as long as you do it sometime during the day, it's going to have a positive effect on your sleep. And that is key. From not only the quantity of your sleep, but the quality of your sleep as well. And think back to when you were a kid and your parents always saying, go outside and play, because then you'll sleep better, get yourself really tired. And that's kind of the same premise that is going on, that if you take a look at good sleep hygiene recommendations that are coming out from national organizations, exercise is on there. That you need to exercise because it promotes healthy sleep. And that is the key aspect. There was a fascinating study that was done in Finland several years ago. And it was this open-ended study that just asked people, what are the 3 best things that you do for sleep? And when they took a look at people's responses, the number one thing that came out was exercise. Exercise is the best thing that I do to promote a healthy sleep. So what's happening now? We've got an obesity epidemic. We have a sedentary epidemic. We also have a sleep deprivation epidemic that is going on. These behaviors are all related. And it's so clear that if we don't move enough during the day, we're not going to sleep as well at night. So kind of the take home from this is it doesn't matter when you do it. As long as you do exercise during the day, it's going to have a positive impact on your sleep.
I read recently that over 84 million Americans are sleep deprived. And it's almost like the silent deprivation that's going on because we don't really talk about it. It's maybe not as sexy or as interesting as some other areas of our health, but getting this good quality sleep and using exercise to help is really a powerful tool.
It really is. And it's all coming down to, our behaviors are all interrelated and they all have an impact, and we can't look at them in isolation. Because if you're not getting enough sleep, not only the next day you're not going to look as good, so there really is something to be said for the beauty sleep. Science has shown that people just don't look as good. You're not going to perform as well. You're more likely to get sick. You're more likely to make errors, get in car accidents, for example. So there's so many important health effects associated with engaging in enough sleep. But then what happens? You don't get enough sleep, and then you compensate for that quick and easy fix. You grab your coffee or your energy drink, and sure, it's going to give you that energy. But you're certainly going to crash, very soon after. And that's unfortunate because we're just so much of that instant gratification and not realizing the importance of these behaviors and how they're all encompassed together. So the average adult should be getting about 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And it's interesting, kind of historically, sleep researchers have taken a look at what's the minimal amount. And that seems to always be the interesting question. What is the minimal amount of sleep I need to be healthy? But now the science has actually looked at what happens if you sleep too much. So what happens if people sleep beyond that 8 hours?
and it's showing that it's just as unhealthy. So once again, here you have a health behavior that has that sweet spot of 7 to 8 hours. You sleep less than that, it's going to be unhealthy, and you sleep more than that, and it's also going to be unhealthy as well.
Dr. Heather Hausenblas, it's been really very, very interesting to learn about sitting being such a negative thing for our evolution and for our health and our well-being, and just even being able to twitch. I had no idea that if I could just twitch and shake my leg up and down, that I would be getting benefit from it. So thank you for sharing such an incredible overview of what exercise means and what standing means and how we can incorporate these different activities into our life. It's been really a true pleasure.
The pleasure's been all mine. Thank you, Naomi. You've been an inspiration for sharing health and wellness messages, so I'm thrilled to be here.
What a fascinating woman.
Right? Who would have thought that just by twitching or moving around like this, my husband loves to do that, you're actually improving your health? That's some form of exercise.
It's great. So I can't believe that we've now finished 8 episodes and we only have one more episode left to go.
That's right.
I know, and I got to thank everybody at home who've already been supporters. Some of you have been clicking on and sharing this with your friend through all 8 episodes. Thank you so much. Some of you even decided to select the button that you can go ahead and make this a part of your home library. So thank you for that. Remember, you got one more day. Get busy. Call some friends. Okay? Out of time, Naomi. Thank you so much for today.
This was excellent.
Absolutely.
We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Here we have this evidence that's showing us that if we eat from 12 to 7 or whatever model of time works for you, it's going to help me burn and mobilize fat. It's going to reduce my risk of so many modern day diseases. It's a no-brainer.
We still believe this crazy myth that fat is bad for you.
Fat is not bad for you.
Good fats, fat made by God, are good for you. Fats made by man are probably not good for you.
You can't just go out and do a CrossFit workout every day and necessarily expect to get the results that you want, or go on a special diet and get the results that you want. So it's very multimodal, multifactorial, and there's a variety of reasons people are resistant to weight loss.